Welcome to Home on the Range, the official podcast of 1881 Ranch, bringing you the latest on the products, topics, and techniques for the shooting, hunting, and adventure lifestyles. Here is your host, tactical deployment of small arms expert and 1881 Ranch Director, Will Egbert Jr.
Greetings, everyone, and thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Home on the Range. I'm your host, Will Egbert, and this episode is number 2. What we're going to be talking about today is just the basis behind what this podcast is going to be bringing to you in the future. All right, so all of our episodes going forward, how we're going to run that or how we're going to do that. Okay, so I think maybe what we can do is we can do a little bit about my background as well. What do you guys think? Want to try that too? All right, we should have enough time. I don't want to take this too long. I want to get into some of these things that it's kind of misleading. Some people think, podcast, if it's being sponsored by or brought to you by or the official of, then it has to do a lot with what that product is. And this is just an outlet for us at 1881 Ranch to kind of share some of our knowledge outside of the club, some of our pastimes, some of the things we found, some of the things we're experiencing, as we're going on with our lives and our families and pursuing our passions. So they're definitely going to be dedicated to a certain topic each time. So like you see in the show notes and the title and that, so you'll understand what that episode is about, and we're going to try and stay pretty close to topic. So let's go over the format a little bit. You heard in the intro, I have to apologize. I'm sorry, the intro is not done, and we wanted to start moving along with these so that we can kind of get them up and posted and work the bugs out. We've got some great equipment here in the studio, and I'm coming to you from a remote location, so we're not yet on the ranch. So it's a little odd. So we're trying to work out some of the bugs and make sure that we've got this thing dialed in. So as long as we're doing it that way, I figured we'd get into some of the background that doesn't need to be as formal as some of the other episodes going forward. So you heard in my description that we're going to be, talking about the latest products, topics, and techniques. We're going to be handling these for various I don't want to say industries, but pastimes, right? So we're definitely going to talk about shooting because, that's one of the core things at 1881 Ranch is our gun ranges, our shooting ranges. The other thing, a lot of us have actually come to the ranch or become a member based around is that we're all hunters. Well, most of us are hunters. I've spent my life big game hunting. My dad has dragged me just about everywhere. And he's a first-generation hunter for himself. Now, his father was not a hunter. He was an electrician in the city of Chicago when he immigrated here. But I imagine my great-grandfather that I spoke about in the previous episode, I'm sure he was maybe at least a little bit of a hunter, as most people were in those days to kind of offset their protein intake and things like that. But now my dad was a brand new to the world. His father wasn't into firearms or anything like that, and so my dad kind of picked it up and really caught into bird shooting, first of all, and collecting some firearms and things like that. And he's got some really strange things. Like he's got an Enfield Sporter that I fell in love with as a kid just because of the action. It just makes a nice sound, and we'll have to go over that in one of the like an old gun episode or something, and show you guys. But they call it a Sporter, but I think they called it a Sporter when they brought it into the country here in the U.S. because it's just an oddball. There's lugs on the front, and that's actually for a suppressor, and it's a free-floated barrel, and the sights are different, and there's mounting holes on the side for an optic, and this is not a Lee Enfield that most people picture a Lee Enfield. Very streamlined, very light, very thin. And that's kind of where he started. And that picked up my head as a young boy because I was always into mechanical things. And it just grew from there. And then as those years went on, we lived in a wooded section of the suburbs outside of Chicago by about 40 minutes or 45 minutes. And, my love for the outdoors just grew because, that's where we lived. We lived in the middle of, I think like 400 or 500 acres of forest preserve. And that's what was in my backyard, raccoons and deer and hawks and eagles, all sorts of stuff. And I love it. I loved it. So as my father started to hunt, I started to hunt. And I've never stopped. Now, being an entrepreneur, you usually don't have a whole lot of time. But that being said, I start attracting other members, and it turns out that these other members are big hunters. So that's why we're going to talk a little bit about the hunting aspect of all of our pastimes. There's no real hunting on 1881 Ranch. That's a different product that cannot overlap with a gun range and a family environment. There's just too many things that can go wrong with that. When I talk about the adventure lifestyles, I'm talking about things that maybe we're not shooters all the time. Maybe we're a little bit more on the adventure side. And that kind of brings us into vehicle-based exploration, camping. I guess guys call it overlanding now, but I don't want to show my age, but back in 95 when I was, starting my adventures with a Land Rover, and packing my own food, gas, and water, and getting on a trail up in northern Wisconsin and driving for days on end, blazing my own trails, that was not called overlanding. I'm sure it was called overlanding in Australia back in 95, but that's kind of where we're going with the adventure lifestyles. And we're going to talk about scuba diving. A couple of the other partners, or at least one of the other partners, I should say, a couple of the other members, but one of the other members or partner is big into scuba diving as well. And I just think about it, if it's anything to do with adventure that's outside of football, basketball, baseball, hockey, I'm all over it. You talk about going to Central America, going surfing, all travel, camping, even just photography. A lot of the photography I've done has been off the beaten path, where you weren't getting into these spots if you didn't have an off-road vehicle, if you didn't want to hike for 10 miles, and then you couldn't survive the night to catch the sunrise or the sunset. So I always took my adventures very seriously, my selection of gear, and that's what brings us to the product side, and the techniques. There's a lot of things that people like to share about how they figured out how to do something a little better, or what you really need to do and what you can leave at home, those types of things. So that's kind of the basis behind the podcast going forward. And we're going to have some really great guests over the next series. And these are going to be chefs. They're going to be entrepreneurs. They're going to be members. They're going to be gun builders. They're going to be retired special forces operators, all sorts of things from my background, my friends, some friends that I'm being introduced to now, and a lot of insights from different folks in the industry. So archery and things like that. I want to say I would have liked to have just listed all the things right in the introduction and be like, hey, we're going to talk about firearms. We're going to talk about archery and bows and traditional bows, compound bows. We're going to talk about long-range vehicle exploration. We're going to talk about all these different types of things, two-way radios and rangefinders and bows and guns and cowboy boots. And I can go on and on and on, but that's what kind of was going to bring us into the adventure lifestyle. So we're going to keep the podcast as fresh as possible. I've listened to a bunch over the years, and I still do. But over that time, I've noticed that the single topic or the hyper-focused podcast can get a little dull. There's only so many times you can tell me how to social media market myself, where if I can't get it done, I don't care how many times you tell me, it's boring. It's not fruitful to me. So I kind of would like to keep everything kind of changing. even if it's something that you're not interested in or maybe you don't know that much about, we're going to try and make sure that it's entertaining, it's informative, and it might get you down the rabbit hole for a different pastime. Yeah. Maybe you don't want to share that with your spouse. Like, you're off to another pastime. That's kind of the running joke in my family. My son just kind of looks at me and he's like, "Yeah, Dad, you know how to do that too?" I said, "Well, son, yeah, I guess I do." So, that being said, I touched on this in episode 1. I guess I'll just go into some of my background now and tell you guys how everything kind of came to be and how I went into the firearms industry or the training industry, came out, went into the knife industry, and found myself right back in the firearms industry again. Only if, well, no, there was an artist phase in there as well, where I tried to, I don't know. All right, let's just start off. All right, so I grew up here in Chicagoland, always in the western suburbs, and in the woods in a rural part of the town, and most of that time, for some reason, I didn't fall into sports. I didn't fall into organized sports and get on the baseball team or this, that, or the other thing. I was into karate and judo and running around out in the woods and climbing trees. And it was very much a country, it was a country lifestyle. We had a well. Our water was on well. Our plumbing was on a septic system. It was nothing to wake up in the morning and find out that oh, the well pump went out. There it is. It's the middle of November. Well pump burned up. We got no water. So it was a very much a country lifestyle growing up for myself. And that kind of formed me as a man, as a young boy, and then into manhood. I looked at life a little differently because there was you couldn't lie about anything. There was really nothing to lie about. You either did it or you didn't. You either could climb that tree or you couldn't. You could either ride your bike up and down these hills or you couldn't. So I grew up a little differently. And my dad, being an Army man, always taught me the value of being honest and forthright, and treating people with respect. And that did wonders for me, I think. It's kind of getting lost in today's day and age, maybe a little bit, but we'll leave that alone. So, grew up in the country and went through school. Always kind of was going the opposite way. While everyone was going to tryouts and basketball games or the Friday night lights, I was on my dirt bike. I was too busy, running it out, and just the wheelie couldn't be long enough. The jump couldn't be high enough. That turn, I can't take it fast enough. Just constantly pushing myself. And then it turns out that, motorsports kind of runs in my family. That's who my dad is. And grew up on the south side with Gary Dyer and a bunch of the other guys, street racing. So, he was very much into motorsports and things like that. So it was kind of a natural fit, and he encouraged me to do that instead. Well, then I went into college. That didn't really work. I walked around a little bit and found out that, a traditional college education wasn't for me. So I left and I went into, took some applied science type things or applied, vocational things. And then heard about, industrial design and followed that. So I talked everybody into, letting me go, and that was it. I went off to Pittsburgh. That was a change. So I went from the country to a very small, weird, quirky town at the time. Pittsburgh has grown up now, finally, I'm glad to see. But I went there for industrial design, and I took it very seriously and came out numerous awards and Dean's List, Honor Roll, all that kind of crazy stuff. But I partied, and I had a lot of fun, met a lot of great people, made a lot of great resources as well, and found out that, I kind of jumped ahead here. All right, so when I was coming out of high school, my dad looked at me, and he knew what I was, and, he didn't really press it, and I wish he would have. Or maybe I don't. I don't know. But You don't have the crystal ball. But at any rate, he said, son, you should probably go to the military. And I said, yeah. At that time, I was too much a free spirit. And looking back on it, they'd have broke me of that in the first week. Or I'd have gotten really big and really strong in any event. But he said, you should go into the military. That really would suit you. Why don't you take college, go to NCO, and, do that. And I'm like, no, I didn't want any part of that. So, and at that time, I was already a very accomplished shooter and hunter. And everything about my life was either dirt bikes or firearms. And that was that. So skip forward to college, didn't work out there, so I went off to industrial design school. I thought I'd be an artist, thought I'd be a designer. That seemed to have a little bit more forward thinkingness to it. Like, okay, that's a real career. And lo and behold, during my second year, I was working on a prototype for a large defense company on the XM107 project. And boom, it just kind of happened. It clicked. Here I am, back playing with guns again. I'm like, all right, whatever. So you try and be an artist, and it drags you right back into designing futuristic weapons that are just now coming in now into their own. So that's a few years back, but I'll spare you guys the details and the dates. We don't want to date ourselves and make ourselves feel too much older. So that being said, I came out of design school and went to work for a couple different design firms. I did a couple projects for some pharmaceutical companies on these inoculation devices that would be used to treat all sorts of really infectious diseases all through Africa. I had my sights set on the CDC and going to be a field manager for disease control. I thought that would be pretty cool. I get to see the world and deal with some very technologically advanced equipment and help people. And just as I was getting through all that, I kind of got derailed there for a little bit, and then 9/11 happened. And as we were just before 9/11, we were still shooting. We were shooting every single weekend. We were doing a lot of these different things. We were still off-roading quite a bit or overlanding quite a bit. And, I came back into that. And all of that being said, I turned back around and here come the trade towers and they're falling to the ground. Well, it just sparked something in me. It stirred my soul as it did with, millions of Americans. I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be somebody. At that moment, I knew where I was supposed to be, and that was the military. But that door had closed. And with my age and the condition of my body I could have probably got back in, but you know what? There's no legs on that dog, right? So going in at that age, I would only have a couple years. And you know what? Special Forces, while I've probably been able to pass most of that, they weren't going to let me go anywhere. So because they're going to invest all this money into me and I'm going to be too old. So that when I say the door shut, that's kind of how that went. And I said, okay, what can I do? What can I do with what I know how to do and kind of give back to the community that I should have been in and give back to America, and kind of fight this fight any way I can. So I started a company by the name of Trident Special Operations. And this was a few of us. We had this idea for many years to do a training facility to handle law enforcement, government, military, that type of thing. And the moment we saw the trade towers go down, I picked up my phone a couple hours later and I called my two friends and I said, well, what do you think? You think you want to do this? And they said, yeah, let's do it. So we kind of pooled our money. My dad joined in with me as well. He didn't leave me out in the cold. He said, you know what? That's great. That's a noble enterprise. I love the cause. Let's do it. So we built the training facility. And it was a very hard thing for the first 2 years because no one understood what we were doing. And when I say this, you have to kind of sit for a minute and kind of let it sink in and understand. If you've never heard of this stuff before, you got to kind of let this sink in for a minute. We built a training facility that was basically a mini FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And we used nothing but simunitions. And at the time, not a whole lot of people were using simunitions because it was very expensive. It still is. And it's very, very dangerous. So the danger aspect comes in is that this is referred to as force-on-force training. Force-on-force training is hand-to-hand combat with these modified firearms. So what you do is you take a real firearm, a real Glock 17 or SIG 226 or whatever. You take out the barrel, you take out the firing pin, and you replace it with a special firing pin and a special barrel and chamber that can only chamber these specialty cartridges made by Simunitions that simulate the blowback of a real firearm and the pop, the bang, and a projectile. And a projectile is a little plastic bullet filled with colored soap. And they hurt like a you-know-what. Okay, I'm not going to lie to you. They carve your skin open. They leave welts that are purple inside of ours. But at the end of the day, they're accurate. They're accurate in small engagement areas. And they really make you aware of what training you're getting and what aspects of life actually come into the outcome of this engagement. So I referred in the intro of the first episode as an expert in the tactical deployment of small arms, and that was kind of a title that was, I don't want to say given, but yet it was very much earned. So if you're thinking outside of the box and you're a little bit of an artist and you've got an active mind and you're really good with firearms and you can put rounds on target in any way, shape, or form, left hand, right hand, up, down, inside out, you become very good at attacking or, like being a bad guy. So that's what we did. I had one of the best jobs in the world. Trident Special Operations, basically in its core, was a whole bunch of guys together. They were doing advanced firearms training against other dudes. I shouldn't say against other dudes, because there were ladies involved in this too. And you fought. And I mean you fought. So our shoot houses were not sterile. They didn't have a couch up against the wall. Now that couch was in the middle of the room. There was a dog bowl full of water. There was all sorts of things in that room that I was going to throw at you. As the instructor, we all played bad guy because we wanted to be able to get and elicit a certain response from the person coming through the door so that they could operate under stress and learn these things and learn where their deficiencies were so that would make them a better warfighter under stress in these close proximity areas that people were going into. I mean, they were going into Afghanistan the first time, and then Iraq, and then back into Afghanistan. These are not small engagement areas. They're very large in scope, but when you get into a house in the middle of Afghanistan, it's small. Like, it's teeny. Now you put 5 dudes, 10 dudes in there, and there's 2 or 3 guys running around, or 2 or 3 other bad guys running around. The stress level goes through the roof. So we started this, and we put together curriculums based upon what I had been taught over the years of going to a lot of specialized schools, knowing a lot of specialized operators, and playing around with these guys on the range and hearing the war stories and hearing this and hearing that. You hear the stories about, oh man, you'd never do that under stress. You're gonna lose that dexterity. You're gonna lose this. Your buddy can be yelling in your ear, and you will never hear him. I know. I've been through this, and these are the stories that I would hear. And that kind of woke me up a little bit. I said, oh, let's do that. Let's get guys used to being in gunfights. Let's get them used to being in a room full of, bad dudes that just want to hurt them. And let's see if we can't do this. And we did. And most of my curriculums were copied all over the country. They were actually, we found copies of them actually going out to some of the other. I'm not going to throw anybody under the bus. My dad always taught me, don't do that. All right. So at any rate, take my word for it. my curriculums they were stolen and brought out there, and they still had my copyright on the bottom of them. I mean, they changed the logos and everything, but they just photocopied them and left my name on the bottom. So I guess they were giving me credit, but that's not what they were doing. They were stealing the curriculums and treating them as their own. They were very aggressive and very forward-thinking. And when you look at what we were doing in 2001, 2002, all the way up to 2006, it's exactly what's being taught today. Only it was done years prior and under stress, which really guys got like nuts. Like they would come out and they're sopping wet after a 10-minute engagement, and they're spent. They can't walk. They can almost barely walk, and no one fired around. Like it wasn't always about shooting. It was about managing stress and managing the physical actions of another person, keeping your team safe, learning about communication, learning about threats of fire, weapons discipline, muzzle discipline, so many different things that go into a gun battle. The first being communication, keeping your eyes open and fighting that tunnel vision. So that's what I did, and did that successfully all the way up to 2006. And it was an eye opener for a lot of different people. We trained military units all the way up into the tier groups. We trained police officers all the way down to officers that just got out of the academy. And Illinois is not a pro-training state, and that's where we built our training facility. So it was an uphill battle, all right? And it still is to this day. The curriculums and the business and all of the things got absorbed by another company. At a certain time, we kind of said, all right, well, we've run our course. I had an unrelated accident at the time that kind of kept me doing something else, and it was time to move. It was time to move on. So we kind of handed the reins over to another large contractor who absorbed Trident Special Operations. But we had a 3-acre facility with 12,000 square feet of shoot houses and multiple different houses in that environment. We redesigned all the safety protocols for the industry. We set the new standard for training, and I was very proud of that. And while we didn't get credit for it on the notoriety, you can see it on shows like, Shooting USA and all of the other ones where you see guys and they're using simunitions now, because that's the way the tier guys trained. It bust into a room and everyone's sitting there with their finger and a little jelly stick hanging out of their gun, and they're going, bang, 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 you're dead. I shot you 4 times. And the other guy's like, you missed. And they're just arguing. And it's like, well, some guys would use paintball. Some people say, well, use paintball. Well, that's fun. But when you can dump 50 rounds onto somebody and it's over with, there's no realisticness there. I can load malfunctions into your gun using simunitions, where literally you could get off 1 round and the next 3 rounds are duds. Go ahead, tap, rack, bang, run through it. Tell your partner you're out so he can take your position and you can fall back, because now you've got to dominate the sector of where you've gotten gunfire from or the threat is coming from. It's a very, very complicated thing to manage, and we did a wonderful job. I had a great team. I was really blessed. I found some operators, some SWAT guys, and a couple guys that didn't even hold a gun before I got a hold of them. And I was blessed with a team that could do anything I needed them to do. And we all grew together, and it was an awesome place. So that was that. I mentioned I had a little bit of an accident, and took me out of the game for a little while. I had 6 years of rehab, and I came back and I started building knives. I said, all right, what am I going to do? Well, actually, I came back in building these crazy adventure straps for the military that were like 4-point load-bearing rigs for different equipment that was in the back of a C-130 for Loadmasters and stuff like that. So that was really cool. And I attached it to my camera at the time because part of my rehab was just getting out and doing some photography. And being an artist and understanding color and, shadows and, being able to draw and shade and do renderings kind of led me into photography. I said, oh man, I could be an adventure photographer. I could be a landscape photographer. Well, that turned out to not fit the bill. When you're a hammer, everything's a nail, right? Yeah, so that's kind of how that works. So I started Vulture Equipment Works, and it started off building these crazy camera straps. Well, that's the retail side, right? And it went on, and we had some great dealers. We had some great products. Everyone loved it. It was being used in the aviation world for air-to-air photography and off-roading and all sorts of different crazy adventurous type stuff, especially the maritime stuff. That was an eye-opener for me. I'd never imagined that guys would be using these rigs underwater to manage multiple video platforms while they were videotaping sharks or rebreathers down at 1,000 feet or something. I couldn't understand it until I saw it. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. It works. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's a 4-point rigging platform. Why wouldn't it? I said, okay, that's cool. So that started. And then I started getting back into, doing something else. What can I do? Oh, let's do some knives. Built a couple prototypes real quick. Yeah, that's good. I'd been hammering on some steel my whole life and finally got a knife that I really liked. Found an OEM contractor, Tops Knives, and approached Mike Fuller and said, hey, I'm a retired contractor and I want to produce this knife. And I've already got a company up and going, but I need some help actually building the knives. So I met with Leo, and we started going through this, and they produced our knives for the first couple of years. And they did a great job. They did a wonderful job. And then came the part where I wanted to switch steels and wanted to do it a little differently. So that's what I did. I moved the manufacturing off and I started bringing it in-house. So I got my feet wet in that and started into a manufacturing company. Well, that led me into building guns. So we were doing custom Glocks, custom 1911s, and building ARs. But most of the guns that we built were for specialty purposes. All right, so they were built for tier operators that needed something 100% reliable. I know everyone's going to say Glock's reliable out of the box. Sure, but they've got a little bit different requirement for the gun, and you just don't start slapping somebody else's barrel in there and somebody else's trigger mechanism and then a third person's firing pin and a fourth person's spring. You can't do that. It creates too much variation and too many problems. So and that's how we built our ARs, with proven platform pieces, and they were more for the customer who wanted a turnkey rifle built to a certain standard. And as we're going along, there was no place for me to shoot, especially here in Illinois. I mean, there is a club that we shoot at out west, but they started getting a little froggy and a little strange and stuff. And I wanted a clubhouse. I wanted some place to be, so when I was out there in the cold, I didn't have to go back and sit in my truck and warm my hands up at the heat, inside the truck. I wanted to be able to go inside a clubhouse, sit down, have a cup of coffee, maybe meet some people that were more like me, a little bit more focused, a little bit more fine-tuned, and a little more driven. So that's what came to be. We kind of sat around again and said, you know what? Why don't we go back into this? And a few people tried to rope me back into going into the government training side, and I worked for a couple contractors and went through some of that and in the old days, and really had a lot of fun. Really had a ton of fun and enlightened the whole 9 yards. But I kept talking to everybody about, it would be great. I'm in a different part in my life. I've got children. I don't want to say I'm getting into the quiet years of my life because I'm way too young for that, as personality-wise. But I tend to look at things a little differently now that I'm getting up in my age. I definitely have not quieted down or calmed down. I still chase some of the crazy things that I always want to do. Like diving with great white sharks out of the cage, and just I have no fear of going into the woods after a grizzly bear. I probably should. There probably should be that healthy fear in my body, but it doesn't come into the equation. Probably because I've been up against real opponents, guys that can actually think their way out of a wet paper bag, and they're coming after you, and they're coming after you with a gun. So that's where I've always been, and I've enjoyed that. But in my later years, I kind of want to be able to have some area that I can talk to some other people and have a club to move around with, and experience all these different things and make new friends. So as we were talking to a couple other folks in the industry, it kind of got me thinking. I'm like, yeah, maybe it's time. Has the gun culture caught up to this in the Midwest? Are there enough of us around? And from what it seems like, there's a ton of us sitting around. And for those of you that are listening that are outside of the Chicagoland area, you've heard the stories about Illinois and, Mayor Daley and Rahm Emanuel and Barack Obama and all the corruption and the sideways politics in Chicago. It's 10 times worse. The reality is it's 10 times worse. You can go from village to village and, you can't carry an 11-round magazine. You can only carry a 10-round magazine in your firearm. And now that we finally have concealed carry, it's been no blessing. All right, because here in Illinois, you can't carry a laser in the city of Chicago. Well, why not? So now you've got a light and laser combo. You got this little TL6 on your Smith & Wesson Shield, right? Because you have to identify your target. And under stress or in an adverse situation where, let's say, I'm pinned down, I want that laser. I'm pinned on the ground and I'm shooting left-handed, upside down, backwards. I want to be able to get eyes on target, light that target up, know where my rounds are going to go, and pull the trigger. So I just think differently. So then you can't have that in the city of Chicago. So now you have to have a different gun or a different setup that typically doesn't register the same way or, instinctively register. So now you got to have a second platform just to go into the city of Chicago. Well, this is getting bonkers. And I'm sure that's why they did what they did. But then we started getting into building guns and things like that. And then Illinois started this change and said, you know what? We don't care that you're licensed by the ATF, that you've got federal oversight. We don't care about any of that. We just care about our agenda. And our agenda is to drive all of you out of the state. Get out of here. We don't like guns here. And I said, all right. I shut down the FFL, the manufacturing portion of Vulture Equipment Works. I shouldn't say I shut it down. I put it on hiatus until I made my move. That's when we kind of sat there. It was a 9/11 moment. We're like, oh, wow. We've got to get this club up and operational. We've got to have a place to go where the rest of, people that want to have a club like this can go. And that's when 1881 Ranch came up. And I've always had this vision, to have a really nice club and stuff outside of the training. So that's when a couple of people started, hey, we can go back into the military training. You got 400 acres and we can do all this. And I said, no, that's not this product. No, I'm done with that. There's plenty of dudes coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq, dudes that are way more qualified than myself to take up that torch and keep running forward. Now, don't get mistaken. I'm still going to be training. I'm still going to be putting on classes. But my focus has changed to more on the defensive attitude for, people and their families and protection in the home and things like that. Because all the things that I was teaching SWAT teams and certifying SWAT teams, I was my own certifying body here in the state of Illinois. I certified law enforcement. So when somebody says, "Oh yeah, that's nice," you had a firearms training company. No, I had a facility. That facility, our team actually had certifications from the state of Illinois to create certify programs, curriculums, all that sort of thing, and create SWAT teams. Actually certify a law enforcement officer to carry a taser. Like, we were our own certifying agency. It was really kind of cool. And it's still unheard of in the state of Illinois. And that did not rub many people the right way. I stepped on a lot of toes just by being here, just by being there, which was unfortunate. Made my life very difficult. But my team did a great job of keeping me on track, and so did my dad. He just kept telling me, "Now, be nice, relax. It'll all work its way out." I said, "All right, fine." The temperance of a parent to their child. At any rate, that's how 1881 kind of came about. That's a little bit about my background. I mean, there's holes everywhere, guys, in that background. You'll fill in over the years and that, and some of the guest speakers that I'm going to bring on, we'll talk about our times together and what we were doing. But I had to find my way into that realm, not from the front door, not from going in from the military side, but I had to go in from the contracting side. So I had to go around the backside, and that sounds a little weird, doesn't it? All right, so I had to find an alternative way into that world. Let's just leave it at that. And I did what I was supposed to do, had fun, but there was always something in me that said, while you're doing this and you're having fun, be careful. You're going to spend a lot of your time. You can go down this rabbit hole and spend years. And you want kids. You want a family. And you can't have both. That's not right to do to them. So you either do this until you're old and gray and beat up or dead, or you did what you did, you got your experience, you learned what you needed to learn, you made your contacts and resources, and you now go start a family and you start a different phase of your life. And that's what I did. But boy, oh boy, I got to tell you, when some of us get together and we put on our plate carriers, and there's some dudes that are really high-speed operators, and they're half my age, that machismo comes out, and I got to say, I get the fire in my eyes, and I'm like, I'll show you guys I can still hang with all the boys. And it's a lot of fun. Of course, you hurt for a couple days afterwards, sliding around the ground and running and diving behind cars and, slamming your knees into the rocks and stuff. But it's still a lot of fun. So we're going to bring a lot of that back out to the ranch. And you don't need to go hardcore with all that stuff. You can just sit behind the bench and, zero in your rifle if you need to. But there's going to be a lot of cool aspects to it. And I think it's time. I think it's time for everybody in Illinois to kind of have a product and a culture that they can get behind. And, it's only 1 hour. We're in a major metropolitan area, Valpo, Northwest Indiana, Chicagoland, the suburbs. Anywhere you go, you have to drive an hour to get to a gun range. You just can't get around it. I mean, an outdoor gun range where you can do things like get out of a car and, pull your gun out of your holster and move your jacket out of the way and engage multiple targets and then do a reload and pop the trunk and get out your AR-15 and tung, get in on the hose. You can't do that in an indoor range. Not around here, at least. You can do that in other spots, but then you're still pretty limited. So that's the whole basis behind it. That's a little bit about my background. We've got some cool sponsors I talked about in episode number 1. Gunworks and Daniel Defense and H&K and Remington and Accuracy International. That one's going to be really fun too. The guys from England were like, "You're doing what?" I said, "Yep, 1,000 yards in the middle of this, in the middle of that, 1 hour outside of Chicago." They're like, that's impossible. And I said, "Yeah, that's what everyone thought until now." So we've got a cool idea. I'm really pumped about it. And it's been a long time coming, and it's a huge project. It has taken a lot out of me, and there's more to come. I'm sure it's going to wring the Ebser living life out of me at this point, but I'm not backing down. I'm going to keep going. So that's a little bit about the podcast, a little bit about me, and let's see where we come up with episode 3. I think maybe we'll get into some. What do we have here? What's on the list? Nutrition, some of evolution and pastimes, and we're going to talk a little bit about some knives. We're going to get into some of that and biology and how that works, anatomy and physiology and how that works, and we'll talk to some really interesting folks. I don't want to spoil it, but yeah, okay, fine. We're going to talk to the Mookie, and we'll get Travis Haley on the line and stuff like that. Definitely Kyle Lamb. Spoke with him at NRA, and he's all on board. He's like, "Oh yeah, no problem, brother. Let's do it." So if you don't know anything about Kyle Lamb, go check out his podcast, Team VTAC, VTAC. He's got a wonderful podcast. I'm really surprised that I've kept my vulgarity down. I'm sure I've let a couple squeak here and there maybe, but that's one thing I really admire about Kyle's podcast is it is family friendly. Sometimes when we're driving downtown, we've got an appointment, and early in the morning, the kids are sleeping in the back, and I'm listening to my podcast or whatever, and it's nice to be able to turn on a podcast, listen to some really cool guys talk about the industry, where it's going, some of the things that make them tick and happy, and some books, and not listen to swear words and all sorts of off color comments. Little ears can't decipher what that really means, and if they're joking or not joking. And how to take stuff with a grain of salt. So that's always a really cool podcast to listen to. And we're going to get Ben Mookie on the line here soon. He and I have been playing phone tag for a little while, but Ben and I are kind of kindred spirits. I met him for the first time out in SHOT Show in January of this past January. But we hit it off, and then we met each other again up at NRA show, and we started talking about some things. And he and I both have recovering from some injuries that are aligned, and hopefully we can get him on the line and we can do an actual episode on just getting that word out about how to do recovery the right way, and some of his trials and tribulations and that, because he's got a very distinct background as well. And then Travis Haley, we met with Travis out in SHOT Show as well. That was a really cool meeting. He's off doing his thing and expanding his company, and he's been doing some classes here in Illinois out at Aurora. But great guy, wonderful set of products. We got in with them we actually met through the Virtua Trainer, which is a simulator we're looking to bring into the ranch as well, so we can actually do live engagements just without the simunitions. And that way we can run that with, your spouse, multiple people in the room, and get some real interactive training. And there's a lot of fun too. So if it's pouring rain, let's say if you come to the ranch and it's pouring rain and you don't want to get soggy wet outside, you can come inside and shoot, plates on the simulator, on the laser simulator. So we're looking to bring that in. A bunch of nice guys from Virtua. A lot of great folks. One person in particular we're going to have on here pretty soon is Doug Turnbull from Turnbull Restorations. He's working on it. Well, he will be working on very shortly some items for us out at the ranch. Some custom 1881 lever guns, all custom case hardened, blued, beautiful wood. We're gonna have a couple of those in the pro shop. One of them will be my personal gun, but that's something that we can leave open to all the members. If you come in, and I should have said this earlier, and that's kind of nice. I should probably start getting more people on the podcast with me to do this. So someone to kind of feed off of and answer questions from and everything. But inside the pro shop, there are going to be some really wonderful guns, and most of them, there'll be a sample, a demo sample, or I'll just have my personal guns in there as well. And if you want to go try them, and just don't beat them up, but go have some fun with them, and that's there for the members as well. And these guys are all kind of put hold in and said, hey, yeah, we'll help you. We think that the product you're building is awesome, and it's the right time, and it's well deserved, and they're all looking for a new home as well. So they need more homes to come and talk and shoot and sell their books and help raise funds for their special causes, and that, as it's a great spot for us to do the same thing, to help the community and the school districts and different programs and that. So we're looking forward to everything. So with that, look at that. We're at almost 50 minutes. I'm so sorry we've gone so long on something so light, but once again, it's kind of an interesting topic. And maybe we'll get into some nutrition or some knives in the next episode. So let's see where we go. We're definitely going to bring in a guest on that show for the next show. That's gonna bring things to a different level. Maybe we'll go over Project G-Wagon and Project Tundra. So we've got a couple off-road builds that we're working on right now, getting ready for the ranch and the engineered terrain park. Project G-Wagon is by far I don't want to say the weirdest, but definitely the oddest project I've worked on, just because you start with a platform that's so expensive, and then you start tearing apart everything that makes it expensive, and you bring it back down to a military vehicle. So it's still got some accoutrements in there, don't get me wrong. The seat heaters still work, but it is definitely going the way of a serious exploration vehicle. So I can't wait to fill you in on that. And we'll bring in Ryan, and he'll fill us in on all the pieces and parts of that. And that truck will be out at the ranch as well along with the Tundra, and we're going to build a Tacoma here pretty soon. We're going to be working with Toyota North America on some of this stuff, and we've got a couple builds, one being one of the ranch trucks, the Tundra, and that'll be used for running, customers or clients and members back and forth. And then, and then there'll be a Tacoma built the same way, so we can use that for off-road driving classes and things. So it's a lot of fun. We'll also be doing some conversions out there. A buddy of mine, Rob, has kind of talked me out of it, but I think after thinking about it for a little bit, I think we're probably going to offer some, some conversions so guys can have trucks built up right then and there and just have a turnkey product. I mean, we've got the room for it. We've got the facilities for it. We've got the maintenance areas and things like that. And I think it'll be a wonderful addition to the ranch. Just another product that we can offer our members and some of our sponsors and supporters. Okay, guys. If you have any questions, reach out to me at membership@1881ranch.com. Again, this has been a great episode. I'm so glad you guys tuned in. And you can reach me at 708-803-1881. All right. Till next time, guys.
Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in to another installment of Home on the Range. Remember, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Till next time, stay wild and true to your heart.